Hi, hello, and welcome to the library. I am not ready, obviously, because I don't know, joking around instead of preparing for stream, so nothing is ready. My excuse today is that it is not a work day, this is a national holiday. This is the National Day in France, 14 juillet. And I don't know, everybody was talking to me because people are not working, and yeah, I don't know. At least some people are not working. But yeah, I hope that you are doing all right. It's a pretty hot day today. I mean, you know, it's bearable because we are not reaching like the levels of the heat wave from a few weeks ago. I think it's like 32 right now, so pretty bearable. It is kind of like a nice day, like for, you know, National Day. But I think like everything is so dry since the past, like, you know, for the past month or so, that a lot of like fireworks have been cancelled kind of like everywhere in France, because like it would be so easy like to start a fire, a forest fire or whatever, where those like activities would normally take place. So I mean, unfortunate, and also like I don't know what to think about like National Day in here. It's kind of complicated. It would even warrant, I think, a sort of like impromptu lecture on like National Day in France. And we can talk about like the French Revolution as well. Can I do that? Do I want to do that? Or am I too lazy to set up things to be able to do that? Let me cook, probably. But first, you say? I'm waiting for the next message. Incredible. She is on a streak. She is really crazy. Thank you very much. Again, it is not mandatory, but it's greatly appreciated. So congratulations on your 4-month streak. I think you're kind of like, I'm kind of like using your subscription streak as like a reminder of like how many months, you know, we have been like affiliated, something like that. It's pretty funny. It has been like 4 months already. I mean, we had a break at some point, but like I think we are doing good work. So thank you again very much. So yeah, let me try to do that. I mean, I don't know what we're trying to do. We should also play some games, but I've talked about that like a lot on stream already. I think like I'm yapping so much about the topic. I want to pivot more into educational content and do less gaming. And I have like ideas. I will have at some point, like we'll talk about that maybe a bit later, maybe in August as well. I will probably have a change of schedule by the but like after the 2.0 model, because I think that I don't know, the afternoon like time slot, it's not bad, but it's kind of like preventing me to really output a lot of work. So I'll adjust if needed, but there will be like a lot more educational content like in September, and it means like a lot more time spent on preparation, and having like the preparation like kind of like cut into, because I need to stream like in the middle of the day, it's a bit weird. So I'm thinking maybe of like moving things around, maybe like streaming during like the evening, But also this is not exactly something that I enjoy, because like the evening I have other things to do. I have like friends I want to talk to. Or I'm also thinking about like moving things in the weekend, or maybe like only doing like 2 streams per week, or going like sometimes 2 streams per week. I don't know. We just don't know. But I kind of want to go out of like gaming content, just because I feel like I only play games. I really play games like on stream, and I don't have like times anymore to play games on my own. And this is a bit sad, right? Like I still enjoy playing games, and I'm reaching a point where I feel like I'm at the end of my gaming arc. If I continue like that, I will be at the end of my gaming arc. Just because I want to spend like more time on. I want to spend more time like reading as well. I haven't been reading like that much for pleasure since like basically high school, or at least undergraduate studies, and I miss that. I think like I'm a reader first. Like video games, it is important for me. It's part of like my life. I spend a lot of time here, but I have less and less incentive of playing games to some extent, mainly because like my research projects kind of like veered away from gaming, and I don't have to play a lot of games nowadays for research. So it's quite interesting. We don't hear this soundtrack like a lot on stream. Yeah, okay. I think like I've set up a few things. Let me see if it works. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the National Day right now, because I think it can be like interesting to like approach the topic, especially for non-French people, although it can also be interesting for French people, obviously. Let me move that here. I think it will be like easier for me to see things. French law, French history, real French history on stream, by the way. Okay, so you know that like the French people obviously are known for. Is it working though? I think it's working. Why do you have like this weird like line at the bottom of my? Oh, because you went. Okay. Everything is moving in such a weird way. It's like breaking my setup every time. Okay. I kind of want to use like this, and can I write in? I don't know what we're doing. Give me like that, for example. Is it? Everything is in shambles. Nothing was prepared today. It's absolutely crazy. Is it working? Yeah, it is kind of working, but we should like use a bigger thing, so I can like, so you can actually see things, by the way. Can you see that? Is it okay? I think it's all right, but like I'm not exactly sure. I can go probably like slightly thicker. Why is my stylus like breaking every time? I can't. Okay, that should be all right. So you may know like that the French Revolution, like one of the big dates that is known is obviously like 1789, and especially like today, the 14th of July, which is the date of like the Bastille prison was taken by revolutionary people. But that is only part of like the story of like the French Revolution. And to be fair, it is like kind of like remembered as like the critical date, but it's much more complicated than that. It was not the big thing. So what I want to do right now and is kind of like go through a very cursory chronology of like what happened during the French Revolution. It's always a very weird thing to teach people about, because it's very complicated. like we tend to divide in France history in like 4 periods, basically, like antiquity, ancient times. Then we have the Middle Ages, then we have the modern era, and then we have the contemporary era. And like the divide between like modern she doesn't know how to write. Between modern, oh my god, my stylus. Please, please, don't break. I swear. Between modern and contemporary is like kind of like, oh my god, why are you breaking every time? Is like the French Revolution. And this is kind of like when you teach history and when you learn history, like you will have a class on modern, you can have a class on contemporary at uni, and then there's like French Revolution, and it's so big that it's like a field of itself, because there is so many things happening basically every day, that having like a clear picture of like the French Revolution is really, 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 really hard. I cannot stress how hard it is. I haven't done like, French history in like probably like 5 or 6 years. So I think like I still have obviously a good grasp on like what happened during the French Revolution. But at the same time, I think that a lot of my knowledge has decayed and I would need like to read a book again. So what I mean to say is that we are trying to do like a very, very, broad introduction. And the situation is obviously way more complicated than that. But okay, what really happened is that during like, I don't know, let's create like a sort of timeline. Perhaps, can I have like a ruler so I can like make a straight, I can make a straight line with like shift, right? Or is it not working? Okay, it is. So we basically start here. And let's say that we go into, I don't know, let's go to like maybe like 5 years after. Things are obviously like continuing afterwards, but like it would be too much. It would be too much. So basically in here, we are still with monarchy, right? We had like a king. This is like a king that you may know because it's Louis the 16th. And there was a point where people were not exactly happy about things in France, and we had like something in here called États généraux. Very interesting music to talk about French Revolution. The États généraux basically were like a sort of like assembly presided by the king to talk about like what happened in the country, and so that people could like give their opinion on things. And people would vote on certain ideas and policies and stuff, or at least give some pointers to the king. The thing is, like, there was a lot of, like, the king was basically trying to get some feedback on the situation in France in what we call cahiers de doléances, so some little, just like notebooks where people would like write their qualms and just like what they want to see in the kingdom. The problem is that when you go to the États généraux, the assembly is like split in 3 groups. So you have like basically like the nobility, like nobles. You have the clergy, so religious people, and you have what we called the tiers état, which is basically like, all the rest people that are neither nobles, neither like clergymen. And the proportion, obviously, like you have a lot more like people in this category, obviously. But when they are voting, one group count for like one vote. So basically you only have 3 votes in this like assembly, and you can imagine, right, that nobles and the clergy, they always vote together, right? Like they are politically allies. It's like, oh yeah, we need to exploit, poor people. So obviously we don't want our privileges to disappear. We want to keep them. So we'll always be together in all like the policies that are like kind of like discussed. And just by being together, we'll like literally like stop the tiers état from pushing for whatever thing they want to do. So there was like before those like états généraux, maybe we won't play like marvelous at all. So let me change the category of the stream, because like it's getting a bit wild here. Let me change the category. Improvised lecture or something like that. And we'll call that just talking, right? Just talking. Just chatting, whatever. Okay. So it should be updated. Whatever. So for those états généraux, the tiers état kind of like pushed for something in particular. They were like they were asking the king that, oh yeah, we want like the situation to change, and so you need to like reform the états généraux. We cannot like abide by this idea of like voting by group. We want to vote by head. And because like the tiers état was more numerous than the other 2 groups combined, if like the états généraux went by a head count for like votes, then the tiers état would win and would be able like to abolish the privileges of the nobles and the clergy. And obviously the nobles and the clergy were not happy with that particular system of voting, so they would like act against it. And by the end, Louis says, so Louis like the 16th, who was like well loved, by the way. He was well loved by French people. He was kind of like a bit locked out on everything. He didn't really understand what was going on politically in the country. And he was like, no, we are not reforming things. We are still like voting per group. And this idea of like him being like very out of touch is kind of a running theme of what will happen in like the following years. He just went completely astray also because like a lot of people were advising him to keep like the privileges of like, monarchy, nobility, clergy. And he kind of like made an enemy of the tiers état at this point, to some extent. What happened afterwards is that like 1 month after, so here we have the serment du jeu de paume. Jeu de paume being like a sort of like, imagine, I mean, there are some sports like that still today, but imagine some sort of like badminton, but you don't have like any racket. You use your hand. Paume is basically the inside of the hand. And so serment du jeu de paume is like, they were basically like the tiers état, they were basically like gathering in like a sort of like I don't know, gymnasium or whatever you want to call that, and they were talking about the whole situation that just happened like a month before. And then there's this very, very famous like painting that is kind of like immortalizing the moment. I think you can see it like here to some extent. I can like make it bigger just for now. And this like particular painting is like kind of showing like people that were not happy with the vote being like, we won't stop until we give France a constitution, until we are reforming this country. And this is maybe like not a very important event in like the grand scheme of things, but it is really remembered as one of the foundational moments where, oh yeah, France is really going toward like a reform of its political system. So very important moment in textbooks, let's say, because it has such a symbolic power and it is really remembered that way. So that was just like a month basically after the États Généraux and like basically the failure of the États Généraux. And then you have like 1 month, 1 month after, you have here basically la prise de la Bastille. And this event is obviously what people remember the most about like the French Revolution, right? We have like a political crisis with the États Généraux, the king is not listening to people. And so you have, and we won't go too much into it because it's very complicated, but you have some people that were kind of worried about the whole situation, because you had like foreign armies coming like around France, and people were kind of worried that like those armies were basically like here to I don't know, kind of crash into the États Généraux and kind of like to support the king, like the nobility and the clergy against the États Généraux. And for like a lot of reasons, because like La Bastille was where like a lot of like powder was stored for the monarchy. Some people would also try to go there and to, you know, get some weapon and stuff. There's a lot more explanations here, a lot more causes. It's very unclear what people really thought at that time. But let's say that in general, people were not happy and they decided to go into the Bastille prison and to like storm it. And that happened. So today. The thing is, the Prise de la Bastille is today, just today. Well, today, but you know, some centuries ago. But this particular like moment was like kind of very bloody. It was very violent and maybe too much. Not like for our standards, but like for people back then, it was like, oh yeah, maybe it went like a bit overboard. Because the people that made like the Serment du Jeu de Paume were not exactly the people who did the Prise de la Bastille. This was kind of like out of what they had like planned, and killing people, really like, you know, rebelling against like the royal authority, that was like slightly too much. It was slightly too much. And obviously it changed a lot of things. It kind of like showed that the royal power was kind of dwindling and was slightly also like crumbling. But people like in political circles, they were like, maybe like we don't need to get rid like of the king. What we want is the constitution. We want to like have like kind of like what, you know, the UK has, like a constitutional monarchy, but like really like breaking everything, that's not exactly what we want. And so opinions were kind of like mixed on this particular event. So I'll just like remove like those things. I don't know, I just cleared like half of the painting, whatever. So that's like the whole starting event for like Prise de la Bastille, whatever. Okay, so now what happened after that? So I'll just put like a few, oops. I'll just put, I wanted to say a few. It will be a small stream. I think we'll just yap about that today. B for like brush, obviously. If I can, oh my god. Photoshop moment. So this is like, we said like États généraux, then there's like discernement, and then there's like Bastille, whatever. So after that, like the États généraux would continue, and at some point, like because of like the Prise de la Bastille, for reasons, obviously, people were very worried. B for ballistic missiles. We wish they would like abolish all the privileges for like the nobility and the clergy, basically. So like the États généraux would conclude here with like a victory of the tiers état. And everything kind of like snowballed from here. It's like they would draft like the Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen, which is like, you know, a very important text on like the right that every people have. That, you know, you should like, it's like basically everybody is equal to each other. That was the big thing of like, oh yeah, we have abolished privileges, and now we say that every man, not woman yet, but every man is equal to every other man. And that's kind of like an important text, obviously. So that was like the Déclaration. Okay, whatever. And then it's basically just, oh no, there's one very important event here. It's also like the Marche des Femmes. So that happened also like in, we're still, you know, in 89. And basically the Marche des Femmes was like a very, very popular moment where there was like some sort of, we were lacking food, basically. We were lacking food. And especially the women, they were like, oh, we need like more food. We just need more food. And people would ask like for some bread, but the royal authority would not really listen. You know, it's kind of like the very famous thing of like Marie Antoinette saying, oh, they want some bread, like they don't have some bread, then they can just like eat some brioche. It's like, okay, she's like a little bit crazy. And because there was like no policies like to alleviate the lack of food, women would like assemble and they would like march to Versailles. If you know like a little bit of France, I mean, it will be a bit weird, but like, oops. Let's do like a sort of like map of France here. Okay, something like that. You have Paris here, right? This is like Paris. And then you have like Versailles. That is like slightly, you know, not that far away, but it's slightly away from Paris. The thing is that the power back then was centered in Versailles because that's where the king was. And so women, they would like walk from Paris to Versailles and try to, you know, ask for some bread and stuff. And they would be stopped basically by the army at some point. But like the army was like, maybe then, you know, they're all just right. So we'll work with like a woman to like the palace, to Versailles. And that moment was kind of like, oh yeah, Versailles has lost its immediate like power and prestige, and now the real political center of France is actually in Paris. So this moment was a bit important because the the army would like accompany like women in that march towards Versailles. And one also consequence of that action is that Versailles was defended by like Swiss guards. And after that point, people were like, no, it's the army that will defend your palace, because we need like French people to do this. And it's kind of like also a way to monitor you, right? And because the king was pressured, he was like forced to accept this particular situation. And that was basically like how like the power would shift away from the king in like 89. And that's basically the situation for quite a while. Like things would not really move from that situation until like we reach 91. Like obviously like Louis XVI was like, things are weird, but like it's manageable, and like I don't mind like giving a little bit of my power. I think it's still all right. But around him, a lot of people were like, this is crazy. Literally, we have people destroying the monarchy. We need to get out of here and to like ask for like other kings and sovereigns in Europe for some help, and we need to crush like those imbecile revolutionaries that are so dangerous for like the crown and the country. And there is a very big moment, which is the fuite de Varennes. So the flight to Varennes. And it was basically a plan for the king to move out of like Versailles and to try to like get to another country. And basically, Austria. The thing is that it failed. It just failed. Can I have like a picture of it? Maybe. Because we have a very, very famous... Or maybe we don't. I don't know. I can't find it just here, and it's making me... Okay, whatever. Oh wait, it's this one. Okay. So the king would like stay at like Varennes in some sort of like inn, but he was caught. As you can see, he was caught by like the royal guard, basically. And what is very interesting in this moment is that for this period here, can I write like mayhap? Even if like, the political power of France, like the royal power has like dwindled, the king was still beloved. He was still like seen as a very, very mild and kind of like not necessarily generous, but like a very thoughtful king that would think about its people. And for people, when he tried to get away from France, that was like a little bit too much. That was a little bit too much. And maybe we cannot really trust him, and maybe we really need like to change the political system. So a lot of people would be killed in that moment. a lot of allies from the king. We don't really need to talk about that. This is a very famous moment, which is la fusillade, the people being killed like on the Champ de Mars. It's mostly important because it kind of like showed the violence of like the revolution, what people were capable of, and it really scared, you know, nobles and stuff. But we don't really need to talk about that. That happened like a few days after like the Fuite de Varennes. Maybe 1 month, I can't remember exactly. And kind of like afterward, the king was forced to accept like a constitutional monarchy. So like that took place like in June, and basically in September, the king was forced like to accept the constitution. He would still be the king, but only like, you know, limited by the power of the assembly. The situation would continue like this. Like the king kind of like makes amends for his like for his behavior. And I think one important thing also to understand, and we need to talk about that. No, we'll talk about that afterwards. Is that obviously countries in Europe were not really happy with the situation. So like stopping the king from fleeing would mean like being an enemy of the country he wanted to flee in, and basically being an enemy of Austria. So like France would like wage a war against like Austria here, and that is known as like the first coalition war, the first revolutionary war, and that was like a very important moment because it was a stress test for the new political regime. Things are a bit complicated. Like the king also made just before like a series of mistakes, but we don't need to talk about that. But for some, well, the war with Austria was like inevitable, and it wouldn't go very well for France at the beginning. France would like lose a lot of battles. And if France would lose the war, that would mean the end of the revolution, basically, of the trying to create a new system. Because it means that like France cannot win without its king, without having a king, a monarchy. And things were like a bit weird until you have like in the end of the year, in September again, you have like a very famous battle, which is the Battle of Valmy. And can I have like a painting for that? And Valmy is not like a big battle. It was like pretty small scale, just near like a village, whatever. But that was the first time the French army would win against like Austria. So very minor victory, but it was conflated as like the biggest thing of all time. It was like, okay, France has finally passed its stress test for like the new regime. And that would like embolden people. It was like such a miraculous victory. You know, in like locally, it was such a massive victory against like all odds that people felt like, okay, maybe it's time to really get rid of like our king, and we're just making like a republic. And that is like the true starting point of the republic in France. So that happened, well, the day after, on the 21st like of September. And you can see that like a lot of things happen, right? It doesn't matter really what happened, but you can say that 3 years has passed before like la prise de la Bastille, until like when the Republic was really created. And it was only after that point that like people were like, okay, so we have like we got rid of our king, so maybe we should like talk about what we do with him. And that's the whole like trial of like the king. And then that he got beheaded by the guillotine afterwards, like the year after. This is very important. Is that again during that period, the king was not seen as something we should really get rid of. This is only like an idea that crept into like the political consensus afterwards, and especially because like the assembly before this, like in this period of like constitutional monarchy, like the assembly was kind of like dominated by like the moderates that are like, yeah, we agree that we need like a constitution, but there's no point in like getting rid of the king. And those would be like the club des feuillets, whatever. We don't really care about them, to be honest. But they would be like opposed to the Jacobins, which is kind of like, the violent people, the people that really want to get rid of like the royalty and stuff. Like they want to behead people. And at the start, like the Club des Feuillets would be like the most important one in the assembly. And the more time was passing, the more like the Jacobin was gaining influence until that point where they would like basically dominate the political life onwards. And then a lot of things are happening. Okay, so why are we talking about all of this? To understand the fête de la Bastille, la fête de la prise de la Bastille, le 14 juillet today. Why is it so important? Because the National Day for France is kind of recent. It was, I'll try to zoom out a little bit. Oh, my whiteboard immersion. Let me try to open some. Okay, I'll just create a new thing. So if you like look at French history again. So today we are in 2025, whatever. There was like obviously the fourth, and let's put just like the end of the war, whatever. This is like the fourth plus like the fifth republic, and we are like living in here. Obviously, there was like a sort of like intermission with the war, whatever. This is like the Second World War. And then we have like this, and this period here is like the Third Republic. And then there is like in this period a lot of bullshit. Too much like bullshit to explain. But let's say we put like here, and this would be like, let's just like simplify by saying that, it's the First Republic. And then this period here is like too much bullshit. Literally this period here, let's say that like it would be this. We could spend like 8 years talking about what happened. There was like Napoleon first. Then after Napoleon, they were trying to rebuild like a republic. It didn't really work. And then there was like also the restoration of the monarchy that would take like several plays, and then a republic. And then Napoleon III would like come in and try like to make like the Second Empire. And the Second Empire is divided into like the authoritarian empire and then like the liberal empire, and then there would be a war with like Prussia, and France would lose this war, and that's at this point like the Third Republic would be like pronounced in here. So on the yellow like period, too many things happened. It's just that cooked. So what I mean to say is that it was a period of like instability where nobody really knew in what direction France would go. Like it's very hard to explain because you would like have alliance with like other countries, and then not at all. You have obviously the cycle of like revolution taking place in Europe at the same time. Sometimes France would like ally with those revolutions, sometimes they would not. A very complicated period. So when the Third Republic was pronounced after the defeat of France in the war, it was like we need to like rebuild some stability. And to do that, maybe we need like a national celebration. And there was like a lot of very, very different proposition. And one proposition was to use like the 14 juillet which is like the official name, by the way, of the national holiday, was to use the 14 juillet as like, and you will understand why, as like the date for the new, French regime. But people, I just told that before, people were like, Prise de la Bastille, that was like really bloody. That was like a bit too insane. This cannot be the national day for France. Like, you would hurt some people by going in that direction. A lot of people in the assembly, and especially the more like conservative people, were like, it cannot really work. And that's when there is a little trick that people did. If we come back here, there is a certain event that took place at that time. And it was literally 1 year after la prise de la Bastille. And this is the fête de la Fédération. And this, like, too much bullshit. And this celebration is basically, we are just like happy to be all together, we are trying to, Prise de la Bastille, things happen, but like we are just happy to be French, right? As much fun as it is to say like on the internet. Like we should like try to be together. Like we don't hate the king, we just like want to have like a good life together. And those like celebrations were kind of like taking place in France very early. Like you had like several fêtes de la Fédération that took place outside of Paris for like, this entire period. Basically, like for like half a year, you had already a lot of things happening in France. Where people would just like be in small villages, they would like have like celebrations and stuff, and it would just be happy. And at some point, Paris was like, maybe we should do the same. Maybe we should do like a celebration for the unity of the nation, and that will be fun. And so this particular like fête de la Fédération was, for some reason that we don't need to talk about, it was done literally 1 year after like Prise de la Bastille. And you had a lot of people. You had like a lot of people. This was like crazy people from every, I don't know, in every corner of France, people that could be peasants, people that were bourgeois, people that were nobles, and stuff. This was really like a moment of national unity. And kind of like the crux of the matter is that the king would make an appearance here. And the king would say, you know what, the constitution, it is quite based. it is quite based, and I thank you like for making a constitution and for allowing me to wield some power through, the rule of the constitution. You're delegating some power to me, and I'm very, proud of this honor, and I will act in a very benevolent way. And so you will be happy with me. And that was the discourse, that was the speech that was kind of planned. But like unexpectedly, the Queen, Marie Antoinette, would like stand up and be like, and I agree as well, and my son agree as well. And people were like, this is crazy. This is absolutely peak. Vive le roi. Vive la reine, vive le dauphin. Thank you. Like we love our king. We love our king, our queen, and we love also France, and we love the constitution, and we love the new political regime that we are trying to build. So really a moment of unity, and like the king was part of it. The royal authority was part of it, and people really liked that. And that's why like people couldn't really, hate the king, because it really felt like he was amenable to a lot of what people were expecting and what they were asking for. So this Fête de la Fédération is kind of like what was used here. Basically, the radical people at that time, so that like took place, choosing the date, it took place in you can't really see it. It took place in 1880. So the radical people, they were like, oh yeah, for us, like choosing this date, it's really about like the Bastille, right? We are here to say that it was really based that we killed all those people, and that we really rebelled against like royal power, and that's like the thing we're aiming for. And for like other people, and mostly, the royalists that were still a big faction at that time in France, it's like, yeah, for us, you know what? We can accept the date if it's about like celebrating the Fête de la Fédération. And that was kind of like the consensus. And when you check like the law that was passed at that time, it's like, oh yeah, the national holiday is the 14th of July. And there's no explanation whatsoever. You can decide for yourself if it's about like Prise de la Bastille, if it's about like Fête de la Fédération. It doesn't matter. Because the point was to be deliberately vague so that everybody would be happy. And everybody was happy with the date. And this is like a sort of like situation where like during like the Third Republic, the average interpretation, like on average, people would link the 14 juillet more with the Fête de la Fédération. And it's only afterwards, it's only like, well, at the tail end of the Third Republic, and especially nowadays, that people are like, you know what, it is really about like the Prise de la Bastille. But there is still, when you check like official text, it's still called 14 juillet. It's not like, oh yeah, this is just the name that, people in France are giving it because it's convenient. No, it's the actual official name of like the national holiday, because we don't want to, pinpoint an exact element. And the reason is that like the Prise de la Bastille is kind of, again, of like, this is an expression of the violence of the revolution. And we didn't really talk about that in here. But after this date, if you know a little bit about French history, oh yeah, this is a terror. This is like terror. This is terror. Like we would like literally kill people for like whatever reason. It's like, oh yeah, you're a royalist. You think like you think we allow like rich people in here, we just kill you. And we would like behead like so many people back to back to back to back. It's like, oh yeah, you are not exactly aligned with like the ideas of, you know, it was at that time, it was not exactly like, you had like a very small faction that had a lot of power, and this was called like the directoire. Like this particular period afterwards, it's the directoire, and this was kind of like very authoritarian. It's like, oh yeah, this is the republic, but this is my republic with like Robespierre, and well, this is not exactly directoire. Directoire is not exactly that, but like whatever. It's a bit complicated. Forget that I said anything about the name. It's not exactly the directoire, but yeah, we would like be very violent. There would be like several war, I guess, like the Vendée War. We won't go into it because it's very complicated. But to some extent, like the Prise de la Bastille is kind of like hinting to like the terror. And again, this was like a bit much because mostly the conservative people that are Republican today, they really, I mean, this was not a nice period. Obviously, the name I think is quite telling. It was not a nice period, and there was like a lot of like some sort of like gratuitous violence, let's say, that was backed up by the people in power. And that's why there's still like this vagueness around what the 14 Juillet is. And this is very funny because when you're watching like on TV, you know what is happening during the 14 Juillet, we don't really know what we're celebrating. It's like, oh yeah, we're celebrating, this day is like for France, but who knows? Who really knows like what we are celebrating? This sounds very French. It is very, it's like the revolution nowadays. It's such a weird legacy to carry. And because like the situation is so complicated, like everything we talked about right here, like it took like almost 1 hour. It is just a cursory introduction. We have barely scratched the surface of what happened like during all those years. And if you say right now that in France you are like for the revolution, it's like you cannot be for everything. You cannot be for everything because there was like a lot of very, very bad things that happened. And sometimes when you see like politicians, and especially in the left, trying to like recapture some spirit of the revolution, you're like, we don't know about that. We really don't know about that. And like, obviously, people think that French people have like some tendencies, a knack for like, you know, protesting and stuff. And this is true to some extent, although like it's obviously very complicated. But if you ask people what they think about the revolutions, yeah, like on average, it's good because, you know, we got like a republic at the end of the day. But first of all, nobody really knows what happened during that time. And second, if they know it's really complicated and they just don't have an opinion, which is also like not our place, you know, like I just don't have an opinion on what really happened during the revolution because it's just too complicated. You don't have a national day. Interesting. We could check that like afterwards and why, if we, I don't know. But yeah, what I mean is that the revolution aesthetics, it's very, very heavily loaded with references and events that are contradictory. You had a lot of some almost like virtuous moments where people would come together and try to create the unity of the nation. And you had a lot of, oh no, we are excluding people from the revolution. You cannot be a revolutionary because you're born rich or whatever. And we just We can only kill you, I'm sorry. Constitutional Day, which is like kind of like similar, because in a lot of countries, like the National Day is like the Constitutional Day. Maybe like you haven't said that it is like a national day per se, but I think it's the case, and especially in Europe, with all like the revolutions, well, the spring of revolutions, and people like getting independence and like having their constitution. So I think it's not like, I would almost equate like National Day to like Constitutional Day, because in a lot of countries I think it's kind of like the same. Officially not a national day, but it pretty much is. Yeah, exactly. I think it's the case like in a lot of countries. It's the case in Asia. It's the case in, I don't know too much about like contemporary African history, so it's hard to say. But that doesn't really surprise me that they are kind of like separate. But this is like, you know, kind of like the national day anyway. But yeah, France, like the situation is very weird because like today you cannot really, you know, if you have like a French flag, yeah, you're not exactly, you know, you don't have a French flag for the revolution. You have a French flag for other reasons, right? And recapturing like this legacy of the revolution is very, very hard. And nobody really knows, you know, like for a lot of people, I would say like the ideals of the Republic, it was done here during the Third Republic. That's when you really had like, oops, can I get my things back, please? Oh, this is this comment in here, okay. That's during the Third Republic that you had like a lot of big social, you know, advances. Okay, there were some ideals of like a just society in this period, but it's here where you had like, okay, so free school. That's where you had like the divide between the church and the state. That's when you had like a lot of social advance, like less work. That's when you had like holidays. That's when you had like a lot of social, like, you know, policies that really have this thing of like, okay, this is like what France is about. That's what French Republic is about. It's about like asserting the independence of like our authority, our political authority, from like external factors like religion and stuff. That's when we were like fighting for like some rights. And things were getting, you know, better slowly. And all the big and very famous political, you know, figures that are still revered to some extent, like in France, they come from this period. This was a very important part of French history because it lasted so long. It lasted until basically like the Second World War. It went through like the First World War without even breaking. And that is the sign of like stability. And that's why people think about like the Third Republic when they think about the Republic. And also because it was a republic that was dominated by the assembly. There was a president, but the president was mostly here to be pretty. It's like, you don't want to be a president in the Third Republic. You want to be the prime minister. That's where the real power is lying. And this idea of like the power is in the assembly, that is really like something that is appealing to some people because it feels like it's the voice of the people that is really taking, you know, decisions and not just one person. And there is this thing where obviously like during the Second World War, we would have like Vichy, which was like, as you know, like allied to like the Nazis. And in the French, like sort of like law and the way like the political system is thinking about itself, in France, we say that the Republic never ceased. It never broke. We always had like a republic in France since 1870. Basically, we're like Vichy. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's just that it was not France. This was not France. France was elsewhere, was like with de Gaulle, was with like the resistants, the people fighting against the Nazis. So the spirit of France, the spirit of like the Republic would like live elsewhere, and Vichy, it's not France, and the Republic never fell. And then we have like the transition like to the fourth, which was also a very like parliamentary like republic. And then there's the fifth with de Gaulle. And this is when things are like starting to shift a little bit. Because at that point, for the Fifth Republic, and this is still what the situation we are today, is that it's a very presidential republic. And that's why people don't like the Fifth in general. And I think it's like pretty much like a consensus among like French people is that, oh yeah, we are like a republic, but we basically have a king. Especially because for like a long time, the election for like the president and the assembly would basically be at the same time. You would like vote for the president, and 3 months after you would vote for like the assembly. But it means that the president's party would ride like the aura of victory from the presidential election. And basically, you would secure like an assembly that was always, favorable to the president with like a clear majority. And it means, in a sense, that like the president has both the executive power and the legislative power. And that's why like you could pass everything that you want. And people don't like that, obviously, because it feels like we don't have this separation of power that is very, healthy in a republic. And that's why you hear so many people in France being like, oh yeah, the president is literally like a king, and maybe we should, do something about that. And that's why people are asking like for a sixth republic, because we feel that it's cooked right now. We are in a political system that is really like created to maximize the power of the president, and this cannot like go on longer. But because of the state of the system, it cannot really fall through electoral process, because the electoral process is obviously rigged in like the direction of the president. And that's why like a lot of people want to recapture the revolutionary aesthetics. But it's like, what are we really doing? Do we have like a real like course of action for the future? We don't know. And the elections in France, it's in like 2 years. I think we are cooked as a country. Okay, I think a lot of Danes can relate to that feeling during World War II. Oh yeah, this feeling of like, we never fell. I think it's like a sort of like, the expansion of like the Third Reich was so quick that what could you do? Especially if like you're a country like Denmark, like what can you really do against like Nazi Germany at that point? Like you're literally locked between Germany and the sea. What can you do? Nothing at all, exactly. And I think it's like, but you still need to like uphold the belief that like we never fall. Because also we won the war. We won the war, and they, like Nazis, they just lost. And this is like a dark page of our history, but we need to go past that, and we need like to invent the fiction that we were always French people that were, kind of like loyal to the Republic, the same way like I don't know how it really happens in Denmark, but like we were always like upholding the values of Denmark and of democracy or whatever. And obviously it's more complicated than that. Like in France, not everybody was like resisting against the Nazis, right? A lot of people were like, yeah, you know, it doesn't really change anything in my life because I'm not, you know, part of like the targeted group, well, the people that the Nazis want to get rid of. So it doesn't really concern me. We still see Danish resistance as national heroes. I think it's the same here. Like, if you talk about like the resistance, it is such a big part of like French history. This is like, you know, even like in the left, people will be like, okay, you are like right wing, but you're upholding like the values of the resistance. And when we fought for that time, so you kind of get a pass. Because like you are like a national heroes and you're like upholding those good values. Because the resistance in France, that was like a lot of very different people, right? That was a lot of okay, you had like people that were like right wing, you know, the more de Gaulle approach. You had a lot of communists, obviously, and they would work together because at that point, like we don't care about, you know, political difference that much. We'll deal with them after the war. And so the resistance was such a big thing in France. And when the war ended, it was time to like craft a new constitution for the country. And that was like put in the hand of the resistance. It's like, okay, let's do something new. And because you had like so many different groups, everybody had like some influence on it. And kind of like the same way as in the UK. In the UK, you know that you have Clément Attlee, which is still like regarded as maybe like the best prime minister in British history because of like the social, you know, welfare system that he implemented after the war. And we kind of had a similar thing in France. It was like the communists would really push like for like sécurité sociale. And the social care, well, the medical care in France was for a very long time believed as like the most powerful social welfare system in the world. And it was like really, really strong. And to be fair, it is still very strong today comparatively to other countries. It's just that right now the country is going, and the politicians are undergoing like a destruction of the social welfare. But it was such a strong system that is still, you know, one of the best in the world. Maybe I think nowadays it's like getting like outpaced by like Nordic countries and probably or maybe like some Asian countries. But that is very, very like important in French history, like the impact that the communists had on a lot of policies. They were never, you know, in power, but because of their roles in the revolution, in the resistance, as you know, heroes of the resistance, we were like, okay, we need to have you in our government. And obviously it's the same thing everywhere in Europe and the world, when like the information that the USSR was like doing a lot of, you know, with the Gulag and stuff and all the crimes against humanity, people will start to reconsider like the place of like communists in their, you know, national life. But just after the war, like communists had like such a big impact on policies. And that was to some extent kind of like the gilded age of like the Fourth Republic. If you ask people that are kind of like politically peeled, and you ask them like the best political period in France in modern, like contemporary French history, you have like a good chance that people will, you know, if they have to, you know, give an answer, they will probably say the Fourth, because it was a time of like putting again like social social ideals like forward. You had like communists in powers. It was like an assembly that had the power, so it meant a lot of discussions and nothing like hyper presidential or nothing close to like a monarchy. And well, the fourth ended because of like guerre d'Algérie, the Algerian War. Which was like not a good page of French history, because that time, basically like that time here, is also like the time of the decolonization in France, and it led to a lot of very, very difficult questions. And basically the Fourth Republic fell because like the Fourth couldn't handle all the complications that came with colonies. And you had like a lot of people that were trying to get some power because they refused the idea of like decolonization, and that's what's prompted like the guerre d'Algérie to some extent, but it's obviously very complicated. So yeah, like French history, this is like chaotic. This is like very, very, very hard. And to like understand, but it's why like, you know, it's so complicated that it's hard to be, you know, proud of our history in France. Obviously we have like some ideals, like the ideals of the revolution, the ideals of like a just society, of fighting when needed, which is kind of point of like the Marseillaise, our national like song. It's really about like the Marseillaise was done, well, we didn't talk about it, but it was basically done in here, invented in here. Can I please write on this slide? When we were fighting against like the king and also like, you know, against Austria. So there are some ideals, but so many different things happen that you cannot be proud of, you know, everything. There are things that you have to discard, and there are things that you have to say that they were just bad, and that it's complicated. Like no period in French history was even remotely like perfect. And I think like it's part of why some people feel kind of like, and especially nowadays, disconnected with French politics and just like what it means like to really have some rights, because we live in a republic, so it should be a republic for the people, right? And at the same time, it doesn't feel that way. At the same time, it doesn't feel that way. And like, yes, people in France, they love to protest, quote unquote, but nowadays it's mostly like empty protests. It's like, if you're like striking, it's not a strike, if you're demonstrating like in Saturday during, you know, your Saturdays, and you're going to work like the rest of the time, it's not really working, right? It doesn't serve any purpose. And that's kind of like the point where we are right now. It's like, oh yeah, we can make like very big demonstrations in France still. It doesn't serve any purpose because it's kind of like just for show. It's just for show. And like the politics, because everybody is used to that in France. Like we are striking, you know, a lot. But politics, they're getting used to that. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just like barking, no bite. And I think it's very nice to see like some people getting inspired by our numbers, the number of people during like demonstration and stuff. And it's very like nice to see like demonstration, especially I think we saw that in America lately, in the US, but also elsewhere in the world. And this is nice when you're like, oh yeah, you know, they're kind of like, they are carrying the flame of French people to some extent. But it's like, to some again, to some extent, you are doing better than us, because at least like what you are working, it's really inspiring some change. Where for the past like years in France, we only had like defensive strikes, and we barely even like defended. The American demonstration at the moment are especially good to see, in my opinion. I do agree, because they're all like very, not aggressive, but like very dynamic demonstrations, and they're giving like a lot of hope to people. They are defensive like demonstrations, but they also carry this idea of, we know that we want like more things and we're fighting for them. And I think it's very good. In France, we have like defensive strikes that are losing. We're striking and we know we are losing. Or at least we're just delaying like the inevitable. I mean, there was like the whole cycle of like strikes a few years before about like the pension, right? The pension reform in France. It was such a big thing. It was like massive, massive. We still lost. We still lost the thing, because like they just don't care. In France, we have something that we call like the... Okay, so let's talk about that. You have obviously like the separation of power in, you know, modern Western pure democracies. You have the executive. You have the executive power. You have the legislative power. And you have like the judicial power. But we don't need to talk about the judicial power right now, because they are just upholding the law, so we'll just put them there. And you have the judicial. Obviously, normally you need to have like a break between the executive and the legislative. They have to be independent from each other for like a country to work, because you cannot like have someone that does both. The same way you cannot have someone that is like the judge, the jury, and the executioner. This is not possible. But because of the situation we talked about with the elections, most of the time, the legislative and executive power are like completely allies. We had like times we called cohabitation, which is when like the executive power is not aligned with the legislative, and like the prime minister is of a different like party, but it didn't really happen in France a lot. Cinder is redeeming a Hydra check. Thank you very much. I'm just yapping. Thank you. And I hope you're doing all right, by the way. So this is like the thing that, you know, should happen like in a normal democracy. And you know that like in most, like in a lot of countries, you have this bicameral system, right? You have, let's call it, I mean, well, use the French term. So you have like the Assemblée Nationale, which is basically like the house, you know, it's like the house of representative or whatever, you know. It's, I'll just like give like the, you know, more generic name of like the lower house. And then you have like on the other side, you have the Senat, which is the upper house. And obviously when you're trying to hi Cinder, when you're trying to like pass a law, it's like a back and forth between them, right? You need like the law to pass like both chambers to be able to be accepted as like a law, and this is like the prerogative of the executive power to pass the law that was decided by the legislative power. And obviously like the executive power is always trying to, you know, play all of its cards to be able to pass a law. And normally you're like, it doesn't really matter, you know, that's like the prerogative of the assembly, like people, and they will have to decide without like any let's say interference from like the executive power. But in France, you have like two things. You have two little sneaky articles in the fifth constitution, the constitution of the Fifth Republic. The most famous one is the 49.3. So the 49.3 article of the constitution. And basically, this article says that the executive power can decide to pass a law by itself if it is ready to engage the entire government into it. So what it means is that you use like the law is being discussed by like the assemblies and you're not happy with the result. So you're like, okay, I'm using my card, I'm using like the 49.3. And you can like contest it, you can like object to it, and you will have to pass like a vote of confidence. Basically, the government is saying like, if you don't like what I'm doing, just like make the government fall, and you have a vote at the assembly. The problem is that because, as we talked just before, because the legislative and the executive power are together, and like the party of the president is, you know, has the majority in the assembly, the government will never fall. You just don't have the numbers like to topple over the government. And so in like the in the Fifth Republic, the 49.3 has become synonymous of like, oh yeah, it's a free card. It's a free card to pass like a law without any discussion because you cannot like fight against it. And then you have like, it's like little brother, the 44.3, the 44.3, which is like kind of the same thing, but it's used to pass like basically a law by removing like all of the amendments that were done to it. So it's like, okay, you are not happy with like you're happy with the law, but you want to pass it with like some additional, you know, conditions. I can get rid of that with the same like basically system by using like this card, and I'm suppressing all of your additions to like that particular law. And it's just, what's the point of like the separation of power when you have like those secret weapons that you can use without restrictions, and you know that you will always win by using this. It's like people don't care about discussions of laws in the Assemblée Nationale, at the Senate and stuff, because you know that if the government is not happy with you, with the discussions, oh yeah, they will just use that and this is over. This is just over. So it doesn't really matter. And that's what happened with the Réforme des retraites, with the pension reform. It's like, yeah, I mean, you know, all the discussion is just to maintain like an appearance of democracy, because at the end of the day, we have tools that allow us to say that democracy doesn't really matter. And that's the extent of like what is happening nowadays, and why like French people are lost, because we just don't know in what direction we need to go. The classic democracy angle, yeah, it's just, and then you ask the question, like people are asking the question, why are people so mistrustful in their own government? Why do they not like? Why do they don't engage in politics anymore? And the reason is simple: is that why would you, when politicians can just like behave like in a way that is just like, inconsiderate of what people really want. There was like a lot of things, especially with Macron, that was kind of hailed at the beginning as like a return to democracy, like to social, to like society in general. And we had like, I can't remember the exact name. Well, it was like basically a climate assembly, and that was something that like Macron, I can't remember the exact name, Macron promised at some point, and the climate assembly was basically, I can't remember the exact number, I think you had like something around like 100 people that were chosen randomly among like citizens to be part of the assembly. And the idea is that they would like work hard on proposing like a direction for like the ecological state of France. I can't exactly remember the exact number of pages like of their report, but I think maybe I'm completely mistaken, but like the thing I have in mind is like it was like 1,400 like pages report. Maybe, I can't remember exactly. But this was like a lot of work by people that were chosen at random. This is very important. They were chosen at random in French, society. And the idea was that with people that are coming from like all, trades in life, we would get a lot of opinions and we could have like interesting directions. But maybe they were not expecting people to really have like a sense of like civic duty and be like, okay, we are chosen here. This is like, we are doing this for France. We're doing it like for the world. So we'll be like very serious about it. And so you had people that, were doing like jobs like, baker, and they would be like, I will learn about like climate and I will talk with like scientists and stuff. I will really educate myself and we will give like the best report ever given on like climate from like the, civil society, baked with like scientific knowledge and with a lot of like suggestions of policies that we can take to make things better. And they gave their report at some point to Macron, and this is when it's not being picked anymore. Macron was like, I don't care. Who cares? Who cares? Yeah, I made that, but like, who cares? And you had like some articles like recently about them being like, I gave everything into that. For years, I've worked like so hard in that assembly. Everybody worked so hard because we felt like we had a duty and we could change things. We could like push like this country in a new direction that is like, climate friendly. And they just discarded that. It's literally, oh yeah, we have put like your report, in a drawer, in some like storeroom, and nobody cares about that. And it's like, why do we care? Why do we care? You have like so many people that are willing to see things changing, but the political system right now is completely enabling what the presidents want to do. And there's just nothing. There's nothing you can say or do like to bring like better days. And okay, we won't talk too much about that. We talked like a little bit about that, but I don't want it to be like the main topic of today. Obviously, we see everywhere in the world like a rise of, the far right. And this is enabled like by the political system that is not willing to, take action against it. Not willing to like educate people, to let people be educated or to educate themselves. And like the climate assembly, when, it was announced, as you said, it was such a big thing. It felt like, oh yeah, we finally have like a mean to, you know, do something concrete about for climate and stuff. And this is like, you know, it will just be random people giving their opinions, but they will work for that. They will really, really work for that. And this is what like a healthy democracy should be, right? This amazing task force of people from different professions, different generations coming together and working like on a very specific topic. You had like very old people, you had like people that were, you know, just getting like 18 and stuff, and they would all work together and they would come with ideas on like agriculture, about city planning, about like economics, about so many different things. And checking just like all like the policies that were proposed in the report, it was eye-opening. It was like, yes, we should believe like in the collective intelligence of people when they really work towards like, you know, a great common goal. And it has just been fumbled, right? It has just been squandered. And because of that, nobody has any hope anymore for whatever big projects like there is. There's this sense of like political apathy because like, what can we do? What can we do? And it's not like, you know, our left in France, it's not like in a great state. It's completely cooked. If you ask me, and I wouldn't answer like live, but like if you ask me if I had an idea of who, for example, I would like support or I want to vote for the next election, I would be like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just that cooked. It's just that cooked. I have voted like, you know, quite some times for election and stuff. Every time I'm forced to to vote strategically. I have never voted for like when it mattered. I have never voted for someone I really trusted. And it's just like this sentiment of like, what are we doing in here? We're playing a losing battle every elections, every year. And then because we still need to defend against the worst, we will be here no matter what, like trying to shield against, you know, the far right or whatever. And it's just like, I don't know. But yeah, that was like a crash course of like French politics, basically. And I don't know, exhausting, honestly. I think it's the case for everyone on this planet, right? It's like, I think we've reached the end of what neoliberal democracies can give. They cannot even give like a hope that it will get better. And I think like for us right now, we are living like in very, very hard years. It will get better at some point, probably. I think like you told that just before, the American like, you know, demonstrations, it's very uplifting. It's very uplifting to see also like people coming together for like local campaigns and getting some like very good wins, I think, showing that like being openly like hopeful, progressive, and working for the people, that really works nowadays. I don't think we're able to translate that like to national level yet, because we need to get into like that bad time. Surely at some point, you know, it will be the case. I'm not like completely hopeless about the situations of politics, because you have a lot of very, you know, bright people that are fighting. I mean, I did that at some point. Like I did some, you know, militant work. I was like an activist as well. And I was able to meet like so many, you know, great people that really believed in like giving their time and their work for the community. And I think that it will never disappear. But we are still not there. And I think like there's this very interesting like, can I find it? Let me try to find something, because I think it can be interesting. It is quite interesting. Let me find that. Maybe I won't find it. No, I don't think I can find it. I think it is a video, I think, like that was on TV. I can't find it, okay. But like basically like the video was like the interviewer would ask like a resistant from Second World War what they thought about like young people nowadays. If like young people, it was like they could change things, like if people are not resistant anymore nowadays. And like the resistant said something like very, very important, I think. He said like, do you believe that everybody was like a resistant back in the days, back in the war? A lot of people were not. A lot of people were not. But what is important is that like some people will never give up. And as long as you have like this small group of people that really like believe in the like ideals that will never like compromise on them, then like a better future will come. Because you just need like a few people to like, take action and to convince the rest. It will take time. It's not like immediate. Same thing as during the war, but it will happen. And it's like fighting against the odds. Like I am afraid to say, and I'm, somewhat ashamed to say, I don't have the strength anymore for that. I spend a lot of time working in, social work, kind of like political work as well. I'm in a stage in my life where I can't do that anymore. I still try to be involved to some extent, but you just like have to pass, your ideals to someone else. I think it was like the big thing at the end of like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Future Redeemed, where it's like, if you're fighting and you're dying, what's the point? And then the character is saying, just pass it on. Just pass it on to someone else. And that's enough. Because you will have done your goal here. You have upheld the ideals long enough so that someone else will be inspired by your actions. And I think it's the important thing. I think like everybody, or at least, everywhere there is someone that is like fighting for all of us. And things will change. Right now it's difficult, but I believe that things will change. That's why, like, I don't mind talking about politics to some extent, like in the stream, because I think that, it's still very important. It's still like, as much as we want relief, and I know that, and I respect like some people being like, no politics in my stream, because I'm not here like for politics. I want to get like out of like the bad news that we're seeing and so on. But my point is like, I do get it, but we can still talk about politics in a hopeful manner. Being like, just like thinking about those ideals and never like giving up on them. I'm not even asking people, to act in real life or whatever, if you don't have the time or the money or whatever, the energy. But keep your ideas with you. There's this beautiful letter, I think I've shared that like maybe to people, but off stream. This beautiful letter from like Walter Benjamin. During like, at the beginning of like World War II, where he was like, sometimes it is good enough to safeguard your ideals in like the strongest metal box you ever created. Because the important thing is that those ideals must be protected. They are sacrosanct. They will never be destroyed. Keep them close. Talk about those things with the people that you like. That's why he was so intent in Walter Benjamin. You can check Walter Benjamin, by the way. He's like a very, very interesting like figure. She cannot write. She cannot write. Walter Benjamin. He was like, I'm keeping, like, I will finish my translation work. Like, it was the war. What are you doing? He was like, no, but like, if nobody like protects poetry, if nobody protects literature, then it will disappear during the war. And this is like the worst thing that can happen. So like, if you have things that you like, things that you want to protect, things that you believe are bringing something to humanity, defend them. Defend them. Share them with the people that you like. Because it will make them, you know, receptive to this, and they will want to like protect it, even if it's not their, you know, key pastime or hobby or whatever. They will be like attuned to your hobbies and stuff, and they will want to protect it. We cannot let culture disappear. That's like the game plan of the right. Culture must disappear. As long as we fight to keep it alive, we will see like the morning sun. And yeah, I don't know. I trust we'll have our solar punk future one day. It will happen one day. It will happen one day. Obviously, you know, it feels when you live day by day that the odds are like stacked against your life, your actions and stuff. But it's kind of like, as cheesy as it may be, it's like if you're not dreaming for yourself or like for, you know, humanity as like a collective group, if you're not dreaming, who will? Who will dream for you? You need to like trust that things will get better. And like I'm not like an optimist like you. I'm a pessimist by heart. I'm like the pessimist idealist. It's like the worst, you know, combo that you can create. But at some point, you need to create some hope for yourself. You need like to enjoy also things that you like. And that's why like I do understand people that are like, oh, this is a no politics zone to some extent. Like we know that those people like are like politically involved. It's just that sometimes you want to have like your, you know, space for yourself, and I do get it. But I think always keep doing what you do with this idea that the future will be better. It's like I'm drawing this now, and one day we'll be able to enjoy it even more. There will be a society. I mean, we'll talk about that. Like, it's very funny because it's kind of tying to what we'll talk about like on Wednesday. An Elden Ring speedrun isn't a political debate. What if it was? But what is the like political implication of doing a speedrun in this society? And I mean that like in a genuine way, because like speedrun, this is like a very, you know, emergent way of playing. And I think it like brings this idea of like, I do what I want with like the medium that was given to me, and it's kind of like very progressive to some extent. But like we will talk about Moomin. This is really an educational week, by the way. We'll talk about Moomin like in Wednesday, and I've wrote that on the server, right? Like the point of like this stream on Wednesday is to explore why Moomin is so popular in Japan and popular in the world in general, but especially in Japan. And you cannot avoid like the political, you know, implications there. I won't talk too much about it because it's for Wednesday, but like we know that Moomin was originally already, you know, kind of like politically engaged against like the Nazis, but also for a society that is to some extent like anti-capitalistic. And then you check like Moomin nowadays and you're like, but this is crazy. This is just like one of the biggest, companies in the world. It's making like an absurd amount of money. And so you need to have this conversation. I think like it would be so easy for me to like skip the conversation of like, okay, but if like Mooming is so like anti-capitalist, doesn't like talking about money, doesn't like talking about, it's not that it doesn't like talking money, but like is thinking about like a world with like, where money is not like the, alpha and the omega. Why do we have like so many like Mooming licenses, and why is Mooming doing that much money? Because it's a company, so it needs to make money. And I'm not even talking about Mooming today. I'm also talking about like Mooming at the beginning, because like Janson really had in mind the economic potential of Mooming. So there is this like tension between capitalism and anti-capitalism for Mooming. That may feel like very, I don't know, it's kind of like a hypocrisy, right? It's like, oh yeah, you are like, I don't know, preaching for a world without like money and stuff, and you're still making money. What can you like answer about that? And there was like a lot of like critiques that were aimed at like Jensen even back then, in like the 50s. And it's like, I mean, yeah, it is. It is to some extent like what we see, and mainly, the idea of like creating a world without money and making people pay like goodies for that. This is probably the most like capitalistic thing possible that you could do. And at the same time, I do believe that it's giving still a lot of hope to people. We'll see how it works exactly, but I think that people don't necessarily seek some radical change. They seek also some comfort. And I think Mooming is giving that like a lot of comfort. And within the bounds of like capitalism, and also like within like the system, being like, okay, you are participating into it, but you know what? Maybe buying like Mooming merch that is kind of like vetted with like companies that are on average nice companies, like for the one that are at least producing like the mugs and stuff. This is probably all right. And there's a performance aspect into it. And jaded people will say, oh yeah, so you have no ideals, like it doesn't really matter for you, like, just like performance. But like the flip side is that we need that in our life. Like we are part of the capitalist system. It's like, there's a big thing about like Disco Elysium when you play like the communist route, being like, oh, we will build 0.0000001% of communism. We are almost there. Your efforts are like so great. And when you check like the communist people, they are not engaging with society. It's like, you need to do better than that. You need to do better than that. You need to do something concrete. You cannot just read, Marx and be like, yeah, okay, like I'm a good leftist. Like, I have some like book references and this is enough. People need to live. And I think like, it is not that like I have no criticism about, I mean, you're talking about that like game industry, about like Mooming, about like so many things. I do. But I also get the idea that people need to have some fun at some point. And I think Mooming, when it comes like to, companies, it's probably like one of the most, acceptable like companies that you can have. We won't talk too much about like the internal of like how the Mooming characters limited company is working, because it's a lot of like, very dry internal like organigrams and stuff, and I think it's not very interesting. But I spent like, a few hours, like quite some time, like working on like the lecture we are doing in 2 days. And it's like, yeah, I can get why people, are happy working in that corporate environment, because it really fosters the ideals that you see in like the Mooming like books and the 90 anime as well. And it's like, we do our best within the bounds of capitalism, and sometimes it's all right. I can't play video games because it supports capitalism, but like I'm always like a proponent of culture is meant to be shared. You don't have to be rich to enjoy culture, to enjoy like media, to enjoy entertainment, and anybody that like thinks so should like reconsider a little bit, their life. There are obviously difficult questions like piracy and stuff like that, the just remuneration of artists and stuff. But like, if you stand for people not having access to culture in like a blanket ban, what kind of like society and what kind of humanity are you like vouching for? I wouldn't be here, and there are so many things that I wouldn't do if I had not like an unlimited access to like culture, like films, games, books, sometimes in a legal manner, sometimes not exactly. And I wouldn't have, have such like a political upbringing. I wouldn't be here doing like research and stuff like this. And I think like it's okay. It's okay to just like wish for like, in the moment, like a better society where people can just like have fun and educate themselves without judgment. I was like, I think we're slightly, veering toward like Zatsudan, but it's okay. I was like seeing like a post on Reddit, because I don't know, you're on Reddit, you get like some mails every now and then about like what you missed on like your big like subreddits that you're in. And I saw like a thing about like on the Japanese learning subreddit, and the question was, why is like Japanese learning so much a one-upmanship? Why are people trying like to flex Japanese to other like learners, and it feels like such an adverse environment to learn in? And this was like a very interesting question. It was far more interesting than I believed, because when you think about it, like language learning, it is a social thing, right? You cannot really learn language alone, normally. But Japanese is on this very, very weird like stage where, well, for Japanese you can learn alone. Because why do people learn like other languages? Themselves. It's like, you may do so for interacting with people. And I think it's the case with English, right? Like you interact with English because it has become the lingua franca of the world. I think it's harder nowadays to like evolve without speaking English. I mean, you can do it, but you will probably struggle compared to other people. I think for work, it's almost being like a necessity nowadays. You need to speak in English. But then you have like a very social experience with English, right? You see English basically everywhere. It's very easy to speak in English with other people. And even when you are between like non-native English speakers, everybody will default to English because it's the language that everybody knows. For Japanese, it's a bit different, right? Because why do people learn Japanese nowadays? I mean, you can be like, you know, an expat. You can like go to Japan and live in Japan, and that's why you're learning Japanese. But I think nowadays you have a lot of people that are learning Japanese just because Japanese soft power. You're learning Japanese to read like anime, manga, watching like films, whatever, untranslated like media, and you don't really care about the social aspect of Japanese. And that's why you can learn basically alone. I think like Japanese is the easiest language to learn in the world on the internet, even easier than English, because people are just putting like free lessons. You have like so many resources. People have like walked the path before you, and you will have like so many like different tools that you can use to learn Japanese. But it means that like it can be a very like solitary experience, and it will also attract like weird people that don't know how to handle, you know, social skills and stuff. And I don't know why, like, if you go on the Japanese like learning subreddit, this is a cesspit of like, you know, bullshit. I mean, it's like the fate of like a subreddit, but like it's made for people that know some Japanese, but that spend more time like arguing with other people instead of like learning the language. And the people that are really learning, they're moving out from, you know, that space. They are just learning the language. They're just talking to some people in Japanese, not like arguing on like small, you know, basic grammar points like on Reddit. But like people were saying, oh, if you think like Reddit is bad, wait until you meet like foreign people in Japan. It seems that in Japan, like foreign people, this is crazy. They are trying like to one up at every corner. And I don't know why. I just don't know why. Like, it may be because like we don't have that much heritage learners. It's mostly like people that are interested in Japanese culture or in Japan that are learning the language basically from zero, which is very different from Chinese, for example, right? Like the Chinese immigration was far more important. So you have like a lot of like second, third generation Chinese immigrants that are trying to learn the language. And you have also a lot of like Chinese people that know how to speak in English, and you have like this back and forth where it's really like about the social aspect of learning, and like a lot of native speakers that will like give like advice to other people. And we don't really have that in Japanese. It's really hard to find like resources written by Japanese people. Basically, when you are like in your Japanese like journey, you will start basically with a lot of people will start with textbooks, let's say. And those textbooks, they are written for a Western audience. And then the more you progress, the more like we are encouraging like people to go towards like textbooks or resources that are made for native people. It's like, oh yeah, you want some help on these grammar points? There's nothing we can really do except like refer you to some like actual Japanese grammar books that people are using in Japan, because you're at that stage where you nobody can really help you. You know, you just read some Japanese books. And it's very rare to find like some native people that will explain you things unless you pay them, you know, on those sites where you can like have a private tutor to speak with them, which I should do at some point, by the way. Just to have my speaking skills like up with the rest of my other like skills. But it's a very solitary experience. It's a very like I don't know, show off experience. You have a lot of people because like so many resources are very like easy to find. They're like, oh yeah, I don't use like textbooks. Like I do like pure immersion. I'm just like watching, you know, like 5 hours of anime per day. I'm just like grinding Japanese. It's so easy. And you have a lot of people also that, because they are weebs, and I really mean that, like, you know, with the least amount of disrespect that I can I can muster. It's like they don't work. You don't work. You have time to learn Japanese, right? Like you spend literally all your day watching anime. So of course you're picking up like a lot of things, but it's not a realistic like experience for most people. And I don't know, there's like this mistrust, I think, like lately in the past years of like traditional learning. Like if you learn with a textbook and you tell that like on the Japanese learning like spheres online, like circles online, they will be like, oh, textbooks, really? Are you like so outdated? You're not like in the age of pure immersion? You're not just doing like watching anime and reading manga and like doing your Enki deck? Are you what, like a prehistoric person? It's crazy. And I think like it's really fostering like this idea of a very like competitive aspect of Japanese learning. People are not proud of like the progress of other people. They're not happy to learn from other people. They want to be the best. And it's like, oh yeah, you know, all the certification for the GLPT, I've done that like in you know, the first level, which is like easy, but like not that easy. Like if you're really new to Japanese, like I think the N5, it's not that easy, right? Like you have to learn how to write, you have to learn like some very basic grammar, which takes a lot of time with a completely new language, especially if it's not like a particle language, a case language. And people will say, oh yeah, the first level, I spent like 15 hours learning everything. 15 hours. I've done that like in one weekend. I've learned everything. And it's like, no, you did not. No, you really did not. Why are you lying to other people? It's just not possible. It's like constantly like a show of like, I've passed the N1. You know, the N1, I think like realistically, on average, maybe it takes like, if you're really serious, it takes maybe 2 or 3 years to get N1. If you're really, 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 really serious and you have time to work on it. But people will be like, oh yeah, I've learned that like in 6 months. In 1 year, I finished like the N1, the highest difficulty of like the Japanese certification, which is not that hard, by the way. It's like B2. But like, what do you mean like in 1 year? Are you lying to yourself? I mean, and even if it's true, like, what are we doing? Are we not like supposed to learn like Japanese together? Be happy with like the language? There is obviously a pride of being able to like learn a language, because I do think that when you're learning a language, you know, genuinely, it takes a lot of effort, and you can be proud of yourself. I do this sometimes, and I don't think like you should be like, you know, there's no shame in like using the language that you use kind of like naturally in your main language, because you're learning, because like you can speak in your language. I think it's fine. People, especially in France, they are like, oh yeah, when someone is like speaking in French and they are like injecting some English, I hate that so much, because it's like, oh yeah, they are such a show off. And I mean, like, sometimes they are, but sometimes they are not, and it's like, I think it's fine, especially if you're in a group where everybody knows how to talk like, you know, English as well. And you can be proud, you know, of like all the efforts that you have put into like working on one skill, working on one language. But there's like also like a limit. Like you can be proud, but it cannot be, you know, prideful. You cannot be like proud to a point like you're like just dunking on people that are not at your level or not like learning the language. Mixing languages is kind of how languages work. Exactly. I mean, again, I think it's a behavior thing. It's like if you're using like a language that, and I mean, I do sometimes use Japanese in context where I'm the only one speaking Japanese, but like, I don't do that like, too much, or at least, I try to keep it like Japanese that people can understand. I mean, if I use like desho at the end of like my sentences, I think that everybody kind of like understands what I mean. I just don't like the right in English. I like desho, but okay. But I won't like start like spouting, things in like French or in Japanese like for 3 minutes. When speaking about important things, if people are not speaking about that. And I think it's like, oh yeah, you're really doing that like for pure like flex. But like, I speak with friends that, speak in English. Everybody is speaking in English. Obviously, you can switch languages. You can like use words in other languages. It's like everybody here is a friend. Everybody here can speak the language, even if sometimes it's at a slightly different level. And we're learning together, right? You're using a word that somebody doesn't know. You explain, and this person will know the word. And I think it's very nice. And yeah, this competitive aspect of like learning, I just don't understand. I really believe that like language and like knowledge is meant to be shared. And that's kind of like the ideal behind the stream, right? Like I want to like teach things. I want to teach things because I think it's interesting to expand the horizon of people in directions that they do not expect. I don't care if you remember like all the lessons that we have talked about. If you remember like the exact, information that I introduced. But if it can like foster some amount of curiosity and to open some windows to the world, seeing that there's other cultures, other things out there, then I've done my job. I've done my job. I mean, moving in Japan, this is such a niche topic nobody really cares about. Not even me, to be honest. Like we kind of like did that as a joke. And I just like, went into the bit and then I did some research. Yeah, some details about the folklore lesson is kind of like, but that's not the point. The point is that that like, I mean, the big thing about like the folklore thing when we talked about like the Tono Monogatari, for me, that was like, the land is alive, right? Is that people are using like a landscape and are putting like some stories and images on that. And that was like with a very specific example of like, no, I mean, yeah, I know, vague in your mind, but like the details don't matter. You can like use like the Tono Monogatari and we can talk about the Iwate prefecture and stuff. But this idea of like people using the land and like putting stories into them and how like it's also like a way to express identity and, regional like, I don't know, yeah, identity, even like pride. It happens everywhere in the world, right? In Denmark, in France, we have like all those tales about what we have in, certain forests or certain like, local places where we have legends. And those legends are being fostered by some works like literature, films and stuff. I mean, I think like the sea is such a big thing in Denmark. I'm sure like you have so many like famous stories that we know, but we also know like even outside of Denmark, but like so many stories that are continue to be passed on from generations. And that's basically the big idea, is that we need to like protect this, heritage. But the exact like details of what we talked about in the Tono Monogatari, who really cares? Who really cares? It's like all the video essays you are watching like on YouTube, right? Like obviously there's an entertainment like aspect, but also it's just like very broad ideas for, to understand the world around us, and it's enough. It's enough. Like I think it was kind of like the same thing with William Turner when we talked about painting. The point is not to remember like how William Turner, was painting and like all the traveling that he did, and how we can like separate his like style in different periods. It's like too niche for anybody to really care about. But the way we have framed the stream was like, okay, we can like take some, paintings and kind of like analyze them. And I think I try like to showcase how like light and shadow was like important, and how we could like see also shapes in the composition. And that's the only important aspect, is that you are able like to pick those ideas and be like, okay, so now I am able like to analyze like paintings on my own, be it like from Turner or someone else, or like, movie frames or whatever. It's just you will get something out of it, even if it's not like the actual, specific topic of the lecture. And like right now I'm writing like some ideas like for the food lectures of next year. I think like, part of it is like, okay, we want to be weeb, so I want to talk about Japan, but also I'm like, everybody eats food, and has a relationship with food. And we'll take Japan as like a key example, but then you'll be able to, I believe, take those ideas for yourself and apply them to your country, your gastronomy, your cuisine, and see how it's changing. We'll talk about like, supermarkets, how it's changing, like how Japanese people are eating. And I'm sure like this is something that we can all relate to, like the rise of like, supermarkets, about like convenience stores, shifting the ways that we're cooking, and shifting also like our the way we're tasting flavors as well. So obviously you won't remember like the exact dates of like when company were, rising in Japan. You won't remember the date of like the exact moment we had like a shift in meat consumption in Japan. But probably you will have like some broader ideas of like how we can think about food and apply them to your own life. And then maybe like, it will like make you think about how you're eating, and if you can change things in the way you're eating, I don't know, for a more climate, conscious diet or something like that. And I think it will be interesting. And that's kind of like the same thing with like rivers. Like my obsession for rivers, it is something that was acquired, but also something that I really want to keep, because I believe that rivers are a very nice catalyst for discussions pertaining to environment, to climate, to the people, to society. I think you'll see that like in all like the videos and discussion we will have in like the long term about like rivers. Obviously I care about rivers, but I also care about people. For me, it's not just like some water. It's like an entire ecosystem with people and living beings present near like the river. And again, like it will be like very Japanese peeled, but we all live with water or rivers around us, and I think it makes us relate with our environment. Like I know that I've started to see like when I'm walking outside, being outside, I see like rivers in a very different way. Just because like I was like, oh yeah, like people are living here, and like there are so many interesting things that now I can see, and that are very interesting to me. Like people being there, animals being there, constructions, how we are handling rivers, what it means to have like beautiful rivers around us, and how we can foster them like as a society. And like everything is political. I don't like want to talk too much about, actual politics, like the politician politics, but I want to talk about society. I want to talk about, and this is for me like the biggest thing of this stream, I want to talk about how we can make the world better. And my goal through my lectures is just to make you curious. There's this beautiful phrase from like André Gide in like Les Nourritures Terrestres, which is, I hope let my book teach you more about yourself than about the book itself. And after that, let my book make you more interested in everything else more than yourself. And that's the point of my stream. My stream is here like as a medium, but if I can bring like some, you know, self-reflection on your life and then make you interested in like other people, about the world around you, then like my job is done. Like I've done literally everything that I want. And for me, that is like the essence of like educational content. It's about empowering people. It's about making people care more about other people, about the world around us all. And I have like ideals, I have like hobbies and like very weird obsessions, and everybody does. But we all live like in the same society, and I think like that's how like at least with my little two hands I can like maybe help craft, you know, a society that is slightly more curious, slightly more open to like other ideas about like diversity and all the beautiful things around us. The Sumida River horseshoe theory. Yes. I mean, it's kind of like, I think it's kind of obvious if you know me, if you have been like here on the stream for quite a long time. Sorry. You know, I'm just here to talk about society at the end of the day. I'm literally like in cultural anthropology. I love talking with people and about society. Even things that, you know, phenomena that I don't exactly understand or like, it doesn't matter. It says something about society and we should talk about them. And that's why I love like the social school of detective fiction, social school of like, you know, basically everything, every like media. Because I don't know, I just love relating with other people. And obviously it makes me a very weird person. People will say that I'm a hater for everything that is not like socially peeled, socially minded. It's kind of the case to some extent, but also because it's what like appeals to me. And I don't know, I think it's just a mindset. I just want to share, you know, my mindset to like some extent. You don't have to do the same crazy things that I do. But if you ask yourself like a question after like watching like a movie or reading a book and be like, oh, you know what, like it is very interesting and it pushes me to like do some research or like explore a new book or see a film that is related, then it's perfect. Like, I do believe that the best way to fight against like, you know, far-right ideals is curiosity and the openness of the mind. I may hate, quote unquote, a lot of things. I'm always curious about them. I'm always willing to do things and explore things that I even know I will not enjoy because it's opening like a window on something else. And I'm never hating, you know, to the extent that like the media is not like absolutely insanely, you know, toxic or whatever, problematic. I relate with people liking things that I don't like. It's okay. I think it is part of like the diversity, and you don't need like me, Abby, to like something to actually like something. It just doesn't matter what I think. And I try to be mindful when I hate things. Like, I always have like criticism about the media per se, not really like about the people. Or if I do, it's about like society as, you know, a general thing, never like personal preferences for things. I don't know what we're yapping about. I don't know how we started on like the 14 juillet and we ended up talking about me being a hater. But yeah, all of that to say, I enjoy like streaming. I enjoy like being able to express those ideas because I'm always like a bit wary with friends that some things can be taken like in a wrong way. And on stream, I think like we have fostered a very, you know, open atmosphere where people are just very happy to talk about what they like, and I really enjoy this. It's important to me. I feel like, and also it's like you don't want like politics and stuff. It's too late. Go away. It will be the case on this stream. We will talk about like society. We will talk about like serious topics because that's part of the brand. And I think if you come here, you should kind of like expect that to some extent. I was like, going through like some translation. I've talked about me translating like a short story from Keigo Higashino. And Keigo Higashino is really talking about like the insecurity of living in Japanese society, of like not fitting in the society. And like the novel I'm translating is basically like a frontal attack on like, you know, being a macho in Japan. And it is like at the center of the case, like how like the murder took place is linked to that idea. And it's like, if I talk about like this short novel, we have to talk about society, right? Like it's just like so prevalent in the story that I cannot just, you know, avoid it. And because it's the type of stories that I like, well, you know what to expect in Miyabi's stream. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Even when we play like games, we might play games like, you know, Mario Odyssey. I will still talk about society and how it's very interesting, the representation of like New Dong City, what it says about like Japanese urbanism and stuff. You know it's cooked. You know it is cooked. But I don't know. I think it's part of the fun. I think like I kind of want to do that because like we're in the yapping stream, so we might as well do that right now, since like Wednesday it will be like a lecture stream, and on Friday we will like play like Trials and of Innocence, and then we won't have the time to really yap a lot. But like we have been streaming for what, like half a year now, almost half a year already, and we tried like many things. I think I think one of the big point I wanted to do was like consistency, streaming like 3 hours 3 times per week. And I think we managed to do that like pretty easily. But also because like consistency is not a problem for me. Like I love structure. I love, you know, a very strict schedule. And I think we're reaching like a point where now we need to like be creative. We need to like experiment like a little bit more. And maybe like pivot into things that I really want to do. I told that again, like at the beginning, gaming is fun. Gaming it's not exactly what I want to do. It's chaos Sigi time. I mean, I will be open to like more, guerrilla things, improvised things. I really want to do some collabs, but like the time frame is obviously very complicated in the middle, like end of the afternoon. So that is part of like the big like thinking that I will have like afterwards during August and September, being like, how do we manage our schedule? What do we want to showcase? And with what type of people do we want to do that? I may have told that like a lot already on stream, but like I have a very high standard on like rating people. I need to rate people that are fitting to some extent like my aesthetics. Because it's easy to rate people like with the Twitch thingy, you see like a selection of channels that are like similar to yours in terms of like view count, or that people that are streaming the same thing. And this can be like interesting. The problem is that you just don't know who you're rating, right? It's kind of like a gamble. And you couldn't say like, but Miyabi, it's not exactly your stream anymore. Like you're off stream, you're just rating someone. If it doesn't really work, if it's not like that good of a person, who cares? Like it doesn't really matter. It still matters to me. It still matters a little bit to me. And that's why like I struggle so much with like networking, because I'm a peculiar person, right? I'm not like a normal person. I'm very intense in my beliefs, I think, which is, well, this is kind of like a personal discussion here, but it's always something that I struggle a little bit with people. I don't want to like compromise too much on like my positions, my ideals, the way I interact with the world. And I've always struggled to find like like-minded people to share that with. I'm really, glad that I have some very close friends that appreciate me for what I am. But I know it's not exactly something that is, searched. And I always had like a problem with that. I always felt that I was a nice person to have around in like a group, but like she brings something in the group dynamic, but like as an individual person, it's a bit more complicated. It's like, do you really want to spend some like alone time with Miyabi? And the answer sometimes it's like, not really. And it's okay. I have my personality. I'm a bit, I'm a bit weird. I'm a bit unique. And I remember that, and I had this discussion with like many different people, I tend to make some people afraid to some extent, just the way I'm behaving. And it's like, bonding for me was really hard, and trying to find people that are similar to me is really hard. So that's why like I really struggle with like collaboration, with the idea of like, oh, let's make new friends and stream with them. I think May, who was streaming just before us, is a wonderful person, right? I mean, I hope she won't like mind me talking about her like in her back like this, but I do believe that like May, is a very thoughtful person, very bubbly in a very good way, and very like open to a lot of things, and it makes her like very Miyabi compatible to some extent. And I'm kind of like searching for this type of profile. And I'm still searching, so it's it's a bit weird, but we will get there at some point. I had this moment where you're thinking about numbers a little bit, and I think like I'm reaching the point where I know that I shouldn't care. I shouldn't care at all about that. I just need to do my things. I just need to be myself and do my things. And that's why I want to do more things that I enjoy. And I need to be like a bit more flexible into things. So is that like chaos Siggy peeled? Maybe. But I think it's also just me like acknowledging that, I cannot please everyone, and I have to also be myself and to do things I like. So that's the entire rationale behind like the educational pivot. We'll still play games, like I still, enjoy gaming, but maybe it will take a slightly different form. Maybe you'll see like other content. I love yapping, and I want like games that are like yapping compatible. So unfortunately, gacha gaming is kind of good for that. We had this discussion, I would never pull on the very first, like the second stream ever. I wouldn't pull live, but I think just like, having something in the background, just as we talk, I think it would be my style. So yeah, a lot of changes, I think, for the 2.0 era, as we are learning from the lessons we have learned in the past 6 months. And I want to reiterate, like, I'm really, really, happy to be streaming, and I'm really, really glad to do that, like, with you, because it has been a very fun journey. 2.0 era is gonna be a blast. I have like so many interesting things that I am thinking about. Like just the ability, I'm really happy with my model right now, but the ability of moving, of doing more expressions and stuff, I think it will be really, really funny. We'll be able to do some interesting content, and it will be like a bit more reactive, and you have not seen it. Okay, what I will do, I mean, I'll talk to you in DM just after, but like there will be like a lot of very, very just interesting content. And I don't know. I'm still, putting a sort of like demarcation between my private life, my other online persona, and Miyabi. I am thinking of like merging them. I'm thinking about merging them to some extent. The problem is that like I'm way more like I'm a bit corporate like on stream, and with Miyabi I'm really not corporate as like my other persona, and that's why like I think like blending them would be weird. But I think like switching between like those persona online, it makes me lose like a lot of time. And that's why, for example, I never use my my Discord as Miyabi, because it's just like too annoying for me. It's just too annoying for me, like to swap account like every now and then to check if things are yeah, I have other things to do. But maybe there will be changes. Maybe, I'll reconsider. I just think that like, yeah, the 2.0 era will be very, very fun. And I'm really, eager to share that with you. So we still have like this week, obviously, before my break. And August will be like also, we will be streaming in August. Maybe not the entirety of the month, because probably I will have to take like some break to prepare things for the redebut. But we still have like, some time to enjoy our 1.0 era, and we still have like some ideas, but it will be mostly chill, I believe. I would be happy to finish all like the games that we have like right now. But that can be done like on August. So yeah, that's basically like everything I wanted to say, I wanted to yap about. And this has been like 2 hours, 40 minutes of like pure yapping. Literally impossible to play like a game after that. I should not be allowed. I should not be allowed to speak. It never ends. It just never ends. She is that crazy. She is that crazy. Because I'm always thinking that, you know, it's very hard to do like a Zatsudan with very few interaction. It's like the sort of stream where you need to have like a lot of people present if you really want to do like pure yapping. Maybe I'm just that crazy. Maybe, you know, like all the voices in my head, it is enough to keep like an entire conversation going. I don't know. I'm weird. Okay. That is basically it for me today. No marvelous. We will never progress on, you know, any games. But at the same times, who cares? Who cares? So once again, this is like a very interesting moment where if you check like the channel on YouTube, you will find like a video on like Marvelous, and you're like, oh yeah, she's playing Marvelous. This is the second chapter, and this is not. So I will have to make another thumbnail to change the name of the stream because it has been completely lies. Complete lies. So congratulations. Okay. So thank you very much for listening to me yapping. Oops, all France, my bad. Thank you very much for being here. I hope that, you know, you had like an interesting peek into like French history and why this country is like completely cooked. I'll see you Wednesday for another like small-ish stream. This is the lecture stream on mumming. And yeah, that will be fun as well. So again, thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.